If you are watching this right now, this is not an accident, and this is not something you randomly clicked on without purpose, because there are moments when God interrupts your routine in a quiet but unmistakable way, and this is one of those moments where heaven is trying to get your attention before something important happens in your life. And the reason you feel drawn to this message today is because deep inside your spirit there has already been a signal that something is shifting around you, even if you cannot explain it yet. And sometimes God sends a warning not to scare you but to prepare you, because preparation is protection and protection is love. And right now there is something happening behind the scenes of your life that you cannot fully see yet, but heaven can already see what is forming ahead of you. And that is why this message reached you at exactly the right time, because God never warns without purpose, and He never speaks without intention. And there are people watching this who have recently felt a strange heaviness in their heart, or an unusual restlessness in their spirit, or even a feeling that something around them is changing but they could not understand why. And what you are feeling is not confusion, it is awareness, because sometimes before God releases a blessing, He first releases a warning, and the warning is not meant to stop you but to guide you into alignment, so that what is coming next will not overwhelm you but will strengthen you. And there are moments when God whispers before He moves loudly, and today is one of those moments when heaven is whispering directly into your situation, telling you to pay attention, because something that looks ordinary on the outside is not ordinary at all. And the enemy often tries to distract people exactly when God is trying to prepare them, because distraction is the easiest way to make someone miss a divine signal. But the fact that you are still here listening right now means you did not miss it, and that means something important is already beginning to shift around your life, and you may not realize it yet, but this warning is connected to a change that has already started forming in the spiritual realm before it becomes visible in the natural world. And sometimes God warns people not because danger is unavoidable, but because destiny is approaching, and destiny always requires awareness before arrival. And there are seasons when heaven begins to close certain doors, not to punish you but to protect you from walking into places that were never meant for your future. And maybe recently you noticed relationships becoming distant, or opportunities suddenly slowing down, or plans not working the way you expected, and you wondered why everything felt different. But what if those changes were not losses at all but signals? And what if what looked like delay was actually direction? And what if what felt like confusion was actually correction? Because sometimes God removes what cannot go where He is taking you. And the truth is, there are people watching this who are standing right at the edge of a transition season, even if they do not recognize it yet. And God is sending this message today because He does not want you walking blindly into the next chapter without understanding what He is doing behind the scenes. And there are moments when God warns you about the voices you are listening to, because not every voice speaking into your life is aligned with your purpose. And sometimes the warning is simply this: be careful who you allow to influence your decisions in this season, because the next step you take is more important than you realize. And heaven knows that one wrong agreement with the wrong voice can delay what God has already prepared for you. And that is why this warning reached you today, because something about your current season requires clarity more than comfort, and awareness more than approval, and courage more than hesitation. And maybe recently you felt a strong sense that something in your routine needed to change, or something in your environment did not feel right anymore, or something in your spirit kept telling you not to ignore a certain situation. and you tried to explain it away, but the feeling did not disappear because sometimes the Holy Spirit repeats a message until it is heard clearly. And right now, God is repeating something to you through this message, saying, do not ignore what your spirit already knows, because there is wisdom inside the warning, and there is protection inside the instruction, and there is love inside the correction. And the reason this matters today is because there are moments when people miss their preparation season simply because they did not recognize it when it arrived, and preparation seasons rarely feel exciting while they are happening, but they always become meaningful later when everything starts making sense. And the truth is, there are blessings that require readiness before arrival, and there are opportunities that require alignment before appearance, and there are breakthroughs that require awareness before manifestation. And right now you are being invited into a moment of awareness that could change how the next chapter of your life unfolds. And sometimes God warns you because He is about to reposition you, and repositioning always feels uncomfortable before it becomes powerful. And maybe recently you noticed things shifting around you in ways you could not explain, or maybe you felt distance where there used to be closeness, or silence where there used to be clarity, or uncertainty where there used to be confidence. And what if those shifts were not signs that something was wrong, but signs that something was changing? Because change often begins quietly before it becomes visible, and heaven often moves invisibly before it moves publicly. And what you are experiencing right now may not be confusion at all, but preparation in disguise, because God does not warn people He plans to ignore, and He does not prepare people He plans to leave behind. And the fact that this message found you today means something about your future is already being arranged in ways you cannot see yet. And there are moments when heaven sends a warning simply to remind someone that they are not alone in what they are facing. And maybe you needed that reminder today more than you realized, because sometimes people carry silent questions inside their hearts that they never speak out loud, and sometimes those questions sound like, why is everything changing around me? Or why does this season feel different? Or why do I feel like something important is about to happen, but I cannot explain what it is? And the answer is often hidden inside the warning itself, because warnings are not meant to create fear, they are meant to create focus. And right now God is inviting you to focus on what He is doing instead of what the world is saying, and to pay attention to what your spirit is sensing instead of what your circumstances are showing. And there are moments when the difference between confusion and clarity is simply the willingness to listen carefully to what heaven is already saying. And today heaven is saying, do not ignore this moment, because something important is being prepared around your life, and the next step you take will matter more than you realize, and the awareness you gain today will become the strength you rely on tomorrow. And what looks like a simple message right now may become the reason you avoided something that would have delayed your destiny, and may become the confirmation you needed before stepping into something that will change your future forever. And sometimes God warns people not because something bad is coming, but because something powerful is closer than they think. And powerful moments always require prepared hearts and prepared minds and prepared spirits. And today this message is part of your preparation, whether you expected it or not, whether you understood it immediately or not, whether you were looking for it or not, because divine timing does not depend on human expectations, and heaven often speaks at the exact moment people are most ready to hear what they did not even realize they needed to hear. And the truth is, there is someone watching this right now who almost skipped this message, but something told them to stay, and that something was not random, and it was not coincidence. And it was not habit, because sometimes the smallest decisions become the biggest turning points, and sometimes the quietest warnings become the loudest confirmations later. And right now you are standing inside one of those moments, whether you realize it yet or not. And what you do with this awareness will shape how confidently you walk into what God is preparing next for your life. And there are moments in life when the warning God sends is not about something you should fear, but about something you should recognize, because recognition is the beginning of transformation. And many people miss what God is doing simply because they expect His voice to arrive loudly when sometimes it arrives gently. And what makes this moment different from other moments in your life is that something inside you already sensed a shift before you even click this video. And maybe you tried to ignore that feeling, or explain it away, or convince yourself that it was just stress or imagination, but deep inside your spirit you knew something was changing, because when heaven begins preparing a person for their next season, there is always a signal that arrives before the transition becomes visible, and that signal often feels like restlessness where there used to be comfort, or clarity where there used to be confusion, or distance where there used to be attachment. And sometimes people misunderstand those signals because they think something is wrong, when in reality something is being rearranged for their protection. And there are people listening right now who recently felt a strong sense that they could not continue thinking the same way they used to think, or trusting the same voices they used to trust, or staying in the same environments that once felt normal. And that feeling is not random, because when God begins preparing someone for what is ahead, He first begins changing what feels acceptable to them in the present. And that change can feel uncomfortable at first, because comfort always tries to keep people where they are, even when destiny is calling them somewhere higher. And right now this warning is not only about what you should avoid, but also about what you should expect, because there are moments when heaven begins moving pieces around your life in ways you cannot immediately understand, but later you realize every change had a purpose, and every delay had protection inside it, and every closed door had direction hidden behind it. And maybe recently you noticed that certain conversations no longer felt right, or certain habits no longer brought peace, or certain plans suddenly stopped working the way you expected. And what if those interruptions were not problems at all, but preparation? Because sometimes the greatest evidence that God is working in your life is not that everything becomes easier, but that everything becomes clearer. And clarity is one of the strongest forms of protection heaven gives before a transition season begins. And the truth is, there are people watching right now who are closer to a breakthrough than they realize, but breakthroughs often arrive quietly before they arrive visibly. And that is why warnings come first, because warnings prepare the heart for what blessings are about to change. And there is something else you need to understand about this moment, because not every warning from God is about danger. Sometimes a warning is simply an invitation to pay attention more carefully to what is happening around you, because there are opportunities forming near you that require awareness to recognize and courage to step into. And maybe recently you felt a strong desire to slow down and think more carefully about certain decisions, or step back from situations that once seemed urgent, or reconsider directions that once seemed obvious. And what you felt was not hesitation, it was guidance, because God often speaks through peace, and when peace begins shifting, it is usually a signal that something important is being adjusted in your path. And right now there is someone listening to this message who almost made a decision recently that would have taken them in a direction they were never meant to go, but something inside them told them to wait. And that voice was not coincidence, it was protection, and the reason that protection arrived when it did is because your next season requires a different level of awareness than your previous season required, and God does not allow someone to step into a higher level of purpose without first increasing their ability to recognize what belongs in their future and what does not, and sometimes the warning you receive is simply this: not everything that looks good is meant for you, and not everything that feels familiar is meant to stay with you, and not everything that once worked will continue working where you are going next, and the sooner someone understands that truth, the easier their transition becomes, because resistance often delays what obedience could accelerate. And there are moments when heaven begins removing distractions before releasing direction, because direction becomes clearer when distraction becomes quieter. And maybe recently you noticed silence in places where there used to be noise, or distance in places where there used to be closeness, or pauses in places where there used to be movement, and those pauses are not empty, they are intentional, because God often creates space before He creates change, and what feels like stillness right now may actually be preparation happening beneath the surface of your life in ways that you cannot yet fully see. And there is something else you should recognize about this warning, because sometimes God sends a message like this not only to protect you from what could delay your future, but also to strengthen you for what is about to accelerate your future, because acceleration without preparation creates confusion, but acceleration with preparation creates confidence, and confidence is what you will need for what is coming next, because there are people watching this message right now who are about to step into opportunities they once prayed for, but when those opportunities arrive, they will require courage instead of hesitation, and faith instead of fear, and awareness instead of doubt. And that is why this warning matters today, because heaven is preparing your perspective before it reveals your next step. And sometimes perspective is the key that unlocks doors people have been standing in front of for years without realizing they were already close enough to walk through them. And what makes this moment especially important is that the shift happening around your life right now is not temporary, it is directional, and directional changes always lead somewhere intentional. And the reason heaven is asking you to pay attention today is because the decisions you make in this season will shape what becomes possible in the next season. And there are moments when a single moment of awareness becomes the turning point someone later recognizes as the beginning of everything changing in their life. And you may not see the full picture yet, but the fact that you are hearing this message right now means something has already begun moving in your favor, even if it has not yet become visible around you. And sometimes the earliest evidence that something is changing is simply the feeling that you are not the same person you were before this season began, and that feeling is not confusion, it is transformation beginning quietly inside your spirit before it becomes visible in your circumstances. And the truth is, heaven never sends a warning without also preparing a path. And the path being prepared for you right now is closer than you think, and clearer than it feels, and stronger than anything that tried to stop you before this moment. There is something you need to understand right now, and it may feel intense when you hear it, but the reason this message keeps reaching you at this exact moment in your life is because what is happening around you is not ordinary pressure. And it is not random confusion, and it is not coincidence that certain relationships suddenly shifted, certain opportunities suddenly paused, certain people suddenly changed their attitude toward you, and certain doors that once seemed open now feel strangely quiet, because sometimes before God protects your future, He first exposes what cannot go with you into the next season. and what feels like delay is actually divine filtering happening right in front of your eyes, even if you cannot fully see it yet. And the warning God is giving you today is not meant to scare you but to prepare you, because preparation is the language heaven uses before acceleration begins. And the truth is, there are people watching your life right now who expected you to stay weak, who expected you to stay discouraged, who expected your faith to slowly fade after everything you went through, but they did not realize that what they thought would break you actually became the very thing that strengthened your spirit and positioned you closer to the breakthrough they cannot see coming yet. And that is exactly why the resistance around you feels stronger than usual, because whenever purpose gets closer, opposition gets louder. And whenever destiny gets closer, distractions become more attractive, and whenever blessing gets closer, doubt tries harder to speak into your mind. But this is the moment you must become more aware than ever before, because not every voice around you is meant to guide you forward, and not every opportunity in front of you is meant to be accepted, and not every door that opens is meant for you to walk through. And this is the warning God wants you to hear today, that your next step matters more than you realize, and your next decision carries weight that will affect the direction of your future in ways you cannot fully understand yet. And there are moments when God allows silence in your life, not because He left you, but because He is watching to see whether you will trust Him even when the answers are not immediately visible. And there are moments when He removes certain comforts from your routine, not to punish you but to reposition your focus towards something higher. And there are moments when He allows people to walk away so that your identity is no longer attached to opinions that were never meant to define you in the first place. And maybe recently you noticed that your patience has been tested more than usual. Maybe you noticed that your emotions feel heavier than they normally do. Maybe you noticed that situations you thought were stable suddenly became uncertain. And maybe part of you wondered if something was going wrong. But what if the truth is something is actually going right behind the scenes in ways you cannot see yet? Because before promotion comes preparation, and before elevation comes separation, and before clarity comes testing. And what you are experiencing right now is not the end of your progress, but the evidence that progress is already happening quietly beneath the surface, even if nobody around you recognizes it yet. And God is warning you today not to lose focus during this sensitive moment, because distractions are often strongest right before transformation begins, and discouragement is often loudest right before confirmation arrives, and fear is often most convincing right before faith opens a new door. And you did not come this far just to stop trusting now. And you did not survive everything behind you just to doubt what is in front of you. And there is a reason this message keeps finding you again and again, because heaven is trying to get your attention before the next shift begins in your life. And the truth is, some of the struggles you faced recently were never meant to destroy you, they were meant to reveal to you how strong you actually are becoming. And some of the closed doors you experienced recently were not rejection, they were protection. And some of the silence you felt recently was not abandonment, it was alignment happening in a way you could not recognize at the time. And this is the moment where many people turn back, because the path feels uncertain, and the pressure feels uncomfortable, and the waiting feels longer than expected. But this is also the moment where those who keep believing step into something they once prayed for but almost stopped expecting. And if you are still here listening to this message right now, it is not by accident, because God does not warn people without purpose, and He does not prepare people without intention, and He does not position people without a plan already waiting ahead of them. and what is coming next in your life will require clarity, courage, discipline, and faith in a way you have never needed before, which is exactly why this warning is arriving now instead of later, because timing matters more than most people realize, and your awareness during this season will determine how smoothly you step into what is already being arranged for you behind the scenes. And there is something powerful about the fact that you are still standing after everything that tried to stop you, because survival itself is evidence that purpose is still alive inside you, and the enemy only fights what carries impact, and the pressure only increases when progress is closer than it appears. And the warning God wants you to remember today is simple but serious. Do not return to old habits that once limited your growth. Do not reconnect with voices that once weakened your confidence. Do not accept labels that once restricted your identity. And do not ignore the quiet direction inside your spirit that keeps telling you that something important is about to change, because that inner awareness you keep feeling is not imagination, it is preparation. And what happens next will make sense later, even if it feels unclear right now. And the reason this message keeps reaching you at this exact time is because your next step is closer than you think, and your next breakthrough is already forming, even if you cannot see it yet. And the next season of your life will require the strongest version of you that has ever existed so far, and that is exactly why God is warning you today to stay alert, stay focused, stay faithful, and stay ready, because what is coming is not ordinary, and once it begins, nothing around you will remain the same again. There is something very important happening in your life right now that most people around you cannot see, and the reason they cannot see it is because spiritual shifts often begin quietly before they become visible publicly. And what you are experiencing in this season is not confusion without meaning, and it is not delay without purpose, and it is not struggle without direction, because sometimes when God is about to move you into a new level, He first allows situations to become uncomfortable so that you will not remain attached to the place you are about to outgrow. And what feels like instability is often the beginning of repositioning, and what feels like pressure is often the signal that transformation has already started working beneath the surface. And the warning God wants you to hear today is that you must not misunderstand this moment, because this is not the time to retreat into fear, and this is not the time to return to habits that once slowed your growth, and this is not the time to ignore the quiet voice inside you that keeps telling you something different is coming, because there are seasons when God speaks loudly through obvious signs, and there are seasons when He speaks gently through subtle changes in your environment. And right now you are in a season where the signs may not be dramatic, but they are extremely meaningful if you pay attention closely enough. And maybe you notice that your patience is being stretched more than usual. And maybe you notice that people you once depended on are suddenly less present than before, and maybe you notice that certain plans you expected to happen quickly are moving slower than you imagined, and part of you wondered whether you were doing something wrong. But what if the truth is that God is adjusting your path so carefully that every step forward must happen at exactly the right time, because sometimes delay is not denial but protection from stepping into something before you are ready to handle it. And sometimes silence is not absence but preparation happening in a way that cannot be rushed, and sometimes separation is not loss but alignment guiding you toward the people who truly belong in your next season. And there is a reason this message is reaching you right now, because God does not send warnings without purpose, and He does not create distance without direction, and He does not allow pressure without promise. And what you are experiencing is part of a larger process that will make sense later, even if it feels confusing now. And this is the moment when many people become discouraged because they cannot see immediate results, and they cannot hear immediate answers, and they cannot recognize immediate progress. But this is also the moment when faith becomes the most powerful decision you can make, because faith allows you to continue moving forward even when clarity has not fully arrived yet, and there are things being arranged for you right now that you could not arrange by yourself. And there are connections being prepared for you that you have not met yet, and there are opportunities forming around you that are closer than you realize. But the warning God wants you to remember today is that preparation requires participation, which means you cannot remain passive during this season and expect transformation to happen automatically, because growth always asks something from you before it gives something to you, and sometimes what it asks is patience, and sometimes what it asks is discipline, and sometimes what it asks is the courage to walk away from what feels familiar so that you can step into what is necessary. And maybe part of the reason this season feels uncomfortable is because you are standing between who you used to be and who you are becoming, and that space in between is never easy because it requires letting go of certainty while trusting something you cannot fully see yet. But the fact that you are still here listening to this message right now means you are stronger than the doubts that tried to stop you, and you are more prepared than the fear that tried to distract you, and you are closer than the delays tried to convince you otherwise. And the truth is, there are moments when people give up right before everything changes simply because they misinterpreted the silence as rejection, and the waiting as failure, and the struggle as proof that nothing was happening. But what if the truth is that everything is happening at once in ways that will only become visible later? And what if the reason this warning keeps reaching you is because God wants you to stay focused long enough to see the shift that is already beginning around you? And there is something powerful about the fact that you did not quit even when things became uncertain, because endurance itself is evidence that purpose is still active inside your life. And the warning God wants you to remember today is to guard your mindset carefully during this season, because the way you think right now will influence the way you step into what is coming next. And if you allow doubt to guide your decisions, you may miss opportunities that were meant for you. But if you allow faith to guide your focus, you will recognize doors that others overlook. And the next part of your journey will require confidence that does not depend on circumstances, and peace that does not depend on approval, and courage that does not depend on certainty, because what is coming next is not meant to look ordinary. And the reason the preparation feels different is because the outcome will be different too. And the message reaching you right now is not accidental, and it is not random, and it is not arriving without reason, because God is positioning you carefully before something begins to change in a way you have been waiting for longer than you realize. And when that moment arrives, you will understand why this season had to happen exactly the way it did, and why this warning reached you exactly when it did, and why the path you are walking right now is leading somewhere greater than anything you thought was possible before. There is a moment in every spiritual journey when the silence around you starts to feel different, not empty but intentional, not lonely but protective. And if you have been feeling recently like certain people stopped calling, like certain doors quietly closed without explanation, like certain plans you once depended on suddenly lost their momentum, then you need to understand that what you are experiencing right now is not abandonment. It is alignment, because God does not always move you forward by adding new things into your life. Sometimes He moves you forward by removing what was secretly slowing you down. And the reason this season feels confusing is because when divine separation begins, it rarely announces itself loudly. It happens gradually, it happens quietly, it happens in ways that make you question whether something went wrong when in reality something finally started going right. And the truth is, there are connections that could not walk with you into your next level. There are conversations that could not survive the clarity God is placing inside your spirit. There are environments that were comfortable but never meant to become permanent. And what you are feeling now is the evidence that your life is being repositioned for something greater than what you have previously known, because growth always requires space. And sometimes God creates that space by moving people out before He moves blessings in, and this is why the enemy tried so hard to make you believe that those losses meant something was ending when in fact something sacred was beginning. Because when God starts preparing your future, He begins by protecting your focus, He begins by strengthening your identity, He begins by separating you from distractions disguised as relationships. And the reason this matters so deeply is because the next season of your life cannot be built with the same mindset, the same fears, the same dependencies that belong to your last season. And right now, even though it feels uncomfortable, even though it feels uncertain, you are being trained to stand stronger than you have ever stood before. And that strength is not coming from circumstances changing around you, it is coming from something changing inside you. And maybe you have already noticed it, maybe you have already felt that quiet shift where things that used to control your emotions no longer have the same power over you, where opinions that once shaped your confidence now feels smaller than they used to wear. Fears that once stopped your movement are starting to lose their voice, and that is not random, that is transformation happening in real time. Because when God begins preparing someone for a breakthrough, He first prepares their heart to carry it. And there are blessings that require emotional strength, there are opportunities that require spiritual clarity, there are assignments that require courage you did not need before. And the reason your life has felt like a process lately is because preparation always comes before elevation. And what makes this moment so important is that many people misunderstand this stage, and they think something is wrong because things feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean dangerous. Unfamiliar often means divine, because you are stepping into territory your past version of yourself could never have handled. And the evidence of that growth is the way you are still standing even after everything you have faced. The evidence of that growth is the way you kept believing even when answers were delayed. The evidence of that growth is the way you kept moving even when encouragement was missing. And that kind of endurance is never wasted, that kind of faith is never ignored, that kind of persistence always leads somewhere intentional. Because God does not develop resilience inside someone unless He already knows the size of the responsibility they are about to receive. And right now, whether you realize it or not, you are closer to that responsibility than you have ever been before. Which is exactly why resistance tried to increase, exactly why doubt tried to return, exactly why distractions suddenly appeared at the same time. Because whenever destiny gets closer, opposition gets louder. But what the enemy did not expect is that you would keep walking anyway. What the enemy did not expect is that you would keep trusting anyway. What the enemy did not expect is that you would keep believing even when the path looked uncertain. And that decision to keep moving forward is the very Reason your story is changing right now because there is a difference between people who stop when things become uncomfortable and people who continue when things become unclear, and you chose to continue, and that choice activated something powerful in the spiritual realm, something that is already beginning to rearrange circumstances in ways you cannot yet fully see, but you will soon recognize, and when that recognition comes you will understand why certain delays had to happen. You will understand why certain separations had to happen. You will understand why certain disappointments had to happen, because they were not punishments, they were protections, they were not setbacks, they were setups, they were not endings, they were transitions leading you toward a version of your life that matches the strength God has been building inside you this entire time. And the reason you can feel this message so deeply right now is because your spirit already knows something is shifting. Your spirit already senses something approaching. Your spirit already understands that this season is not permanent but purposeful, and when purpose begins to rise inside a person, everything around them starts to reorganize in ways that make room for what is coming next. So if things have felt different lately, if relationships have felt quieter lately, if your direction has felt uncertain lately, do not mistake that silence for absence. Because sometimes silence is where God speaks the loudest. Sometimes stillness is where God moves the fastest. Sometimes separation is where God protects the strongest. And what you are walking through right now is not random confusion, it is intentional positioning for a breakthrough that is closer than you think, and stronger than you expected, and more perfectly timed than you could have planned on your own. And that is why you are still here, that is why you are still standing, that is why you are still believing, because the same God who began this transformation inside your life has already prepared the moment where everything starts making sense. And when that moment arrives, you will not just see the change, you will understand the purpose behind every step that brought you here, and you will realize that nothing you endured was wasted, not your patience, not your tears, not your waiting, not your faith, because every part of this journey has been shaping you into someone ready to receive what is finally on its way toward you right now. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that most people around you cannot see yet, but your spirit can already feel it. And that feeling you have been carrying deep inside you lately, the feeling that something is changing even though nothing around you looks different yet, is not imagination. And it is not wishful thinking, it is confirmation, because before God shifts your circumstances, He always shifts your awareness first, and what you are sensing right now is the quiet evidence that your life is moving into a new direction that your past version of yourself could not have understood. And the reason this moment feels so intense is because whenever a breakthrough begins forming in the unseen realm, there is always a period where your faith is tested, not because God is unsure about you, but because He is strengthening you for what is about to arrive. And the truth is, there are blessings that require preparation, there are opportunities that require maturity, there are doors that only open once your confidence is no longer dependent on people's approval but anchored in God's purpose. And the reason you have been walking through uncertainty lately is because clarity is being built inside you in ways that will make your next step stronger than anything you have taken before. And maybe you have noticed that things you once tolerated no longer feel acceptable. Maybe you have noticed that situations you once stayed silent about now make your spirit restless. Maybe you have noticed that your patience has changed, your focus has changed, your expectations have changed, and that is not coincidence, that is transformation, because whenever God begins preparing someone for elevation, He first changes what they are willing to accept and what they are willing to release. And what you are releasing right now is not just people or habits or distractions. You are releasing the limits that once defined your life. You are releasing the fears that once delayed your decisions. You are releasing the doubts that once made you question your value. And the reason this release feels uncomfortable is because growth always requires courage, and courage always feels unfamiliar before it becomes natural. But what makes this season different from every other season you have walked through before is that this time you did not quit. This time you did not return to what was easy. This time you did not allow fear to make your decisions for you, and because of that choice, something powerful has already started shifting in your favor, even if you cannot fully see it yet. Because when someone continues moving forward with faith, even when answers are delayed, even when support is missing, even when the outcome is unclear, it activates a level of divine movement that cannot be stopped by ordinary obstacles. And that movement is already surrounding your life right now, rearranging conversations, rearranging opportunities, rearranging timing in ways that will soon begin to reveal themselves one moment at a time. And when those moments begin appearing, you will understand why God asked you to keep trusting even when the path looked uncertain. You will understand why He asked you to stay patient even when progress felt slow. You will understand why He asked you to keep believing even when results were invisible. Because the truth is, there are seasons where God works quietly, not because nothing is happening, but because something sacred is being protected until the right moment arrives. And what you are walking through right now is one of those sacred seasons where preparation is taking place behind the scenes, where strength is forming inside your spirit, where confidence is rising inside your identity, where clarity is beginning to replace confusion, and purpose is beginning to replace fear. And the reason this matters so deeply is because once purpose becomes clear, distractions begin losing their power. Once purpose becomes strong, doubt begins losing its voice. Once purpose becomes steady, the future begins opening in ways you never expected. And that is exactly where you are standing right now, even if it does not fully look like it yet, because the evidence of transformation is already visible in the way you think, the way you respond, the way you endure, the way you continue moving forward even after everything you have faced. And that endurance is not ordinary endurance. It is the kind of endurance that only grows inside someone who is being prepared for something bigger than what they have previously experienced. And the reason the enemy tried so hard to discourage you recently is because discouragement is always sent when destiny gets closer. Confusion is always sent when clarity is about to appear. Resistance is always sent when progress is already in motion. But what the enemy did not expect is that your faith would remain stronger than your fear, your patience would remain stronger than your frustration, your belief would remain stronger than your doubts. And because you stayed strong during a season that was designed to make you stop, you have already stepped into a level of favor that will soon begin showing itself through unexpected answers, unexpected connections, unexpected opportunities, and unexpected confirmation that everything you endured was leading somewhere meaningful and intentional. And when those confirmations begin appearing, you will not just recognize the blessing, you will recognize the timing, because the timing of God never arrives late, it arrives prepared, it arrives complete, it arrives stronger than anything you could have created on your own. And that is why this season had to happen this way, because God was not only preparing the blessing, He was preparing you to carry the blessing with confidence, with wisdom, with strength, and with clarity that could never be shaken by temporary uncertainty. And now, as you continue walking forward even without seeing every detail yet, something powerful is already unfolding in your favor. Something Intentional is already aligning around your life. Something greater than what you expected is already closer than you realize, and the same God who guided you through every difficult moment that tried to stop you is the same God who is now guiding you toward the moment where everything begins making sense. And when that moment arrives, you will understand why you had to keep going, why you had to stay patient, why you had to keep believing, because every step you took during this season of faith has been moving you closer to a breakthrough that is already on its way toward you right now, and nothing that tried to delay you will be able to stop what God has already decided to release into your life at exactly the right time. There is a reason you have made it this far through everything that tried to slow you down, discourage you, confuse you, and even make you question whether continuing forward was worth it, because what you are walking through right now is not just another ordinary season in your life. It is a turning point that has been forming quietly behind the scenes for longer than you realize, and the reason the pressure increased recently, the reason the uncertainty felt heavier recently, the reason certain situations became more complicated than expected is because whenever God begins preparing someone to step into something greater than their past, He allows a season where their strength becomes visible, not to Him because He already knows your strength, but to you, so that you can finally see what He has already placed inside you. And maybe you have started noticing that even though some things around you still feel unsettled, something inside you feels steadier than before, something inside you feels stronger than before, something inside you refuses to return to the same fears that once controlled your decisions, and that change inside you is not accidental. It is evidence that your identity is being rebuilt on something deeper than circumstances, because when God begins establishing a new direction in someone's life, He does not only change where they are going, He changes who they are becoming along the way. And what you are becoming right now is someone who no longer measures progress only by what is visible, but by what is developing inside your spirit, someone who no longer depends on quick confirmation from people but trusts the quiet confirmation that comes from faith, someone who no longer needs everything to make sense before moving forward but understands that obedience often begins before understanding. And the reason this transformation matters so much is because there are blessings that require a stronger version of you than the version that began this journey. There are opportunities that require confidence that cannot be shaken by temporary delays. There are moments approaching your life that will require clarity, courage, and endurance, all working together at the same time. And what makes this season powerful is that even though you may not yet see the full picture forming around you, you are already becoming the person who can carry what is coming next, and the evidence of that preparation is the way you kept believing even when encouragement disappeared, the way you kept moving even when progress felt invisible, the way you kept trusting even when answers were delayed. And that kind of persistence always activates something greater than what you can see, because faith that continues without immediate results always creates movement in the unseen before it creates results in the visible. And what is happening right now is that movement is already unfolding around your life in ways that will soon become impossible to ignore, because there are conversations already being aligned in your favor. There are opportunities already moving closer to your path. There are answers already forming at exactly the right time, and the reason they are arriving this way is because God never releases something important into your life before the moment is strong enough to support it. And the truth is, the moment you are stepping into now is stronger than any moment you have previously walked through, not because the circumstances are easier, but because your spirit is stronger, your patience is deeper, your confidence is steadier, and your vision is clearer than it has ever been before. And this is exactly why the enemy tried so hard to distract you recently, because distraction is always sent when direction becomes clear, discouragement is always sent when progress becomes real, confusion is always sent when purpose begins to rise. But what the enemy could not stop was your decision to continue. What the enemy could not silence was your belief. What the enemy could not break was your endurance. And because you stayed consistent during a season that was meant to make you doubt yourself, something powerful has already started shifting in your favor. Something intentional has already started aligning around your life. Something meaningful has already begun preparing the path ahead of you, and soon you will begin noticing small confirmations appearing in places where there used to be silence, small opportunities appearing where there used to be delay, small clarity appearing where there used to be confusion. And those confirmations will not arrive all at once. They will arrive step by step, moment by moment, in ways that strengthen your confidence without overwhelming your faith, because the way God moves in someone's life is never random. It is always precise, it is always intentional, it is always perfectly timed. And what you are experiencing right now is the beginning of a season where things that once felt impossible will begin feeling natural. Things that once felt distant will begin moving closer. Things that once felt uncertain will begin becoming clear. And when those changes begin unfolding around you, you will understand why this journey required so much patience, why this process required so much faith, why this season required so much endurance, because every challenge you walked through was building the strength you now carry. Every delay you survived was protecting the timing that is now approaching. Every moment you kept believing even when results were invisible was shaping the future that is now beginning to reveal itself. And the same God who guided you through every difficult moment that tried to stop you is the same God who is now guiding you toward the moment where everything begins making sense. And when that moment arrives, you will not only see the blessing, you will recognize the preparation behind it, you will recognize the purpose inside it, you will recognize the reason you had to keep going even when the path felt uncertain, because everything you endured has been leading you step by step toward a breakthrough that is already closer than it has ever been before. And nothing that tried to delay you will be able to stop what God has already prepared for your life at exactly the right time. And there is something else you need to understand in this moment, because what is happening around you right now is not confusion without purpose, and it is not delay without direction, and it is definitely not rejection without reason. It is preparation that your natural eyes cannot fully recognize yet, because when God begins moving you closer to the life that was already written for you before anyone ever doubted you, before anyone ever misunderstood you, before anyone ever walked away from you, He does something very intentional first, and that is He starts removing what cannot survive where He is taking you next. And the reason the season has felt heavier than expected is because what is leaving your life right now was never small. Even if it looked ordinary on the surface, it carried emotional weight. It carried history, it carried familiarity, it carried comfort, but it did not carry your future. And that is why your spirit has been feeling a strange mixture of sadness and peace at the same time, because part of you is grieving what is ending while another deeper part of you is already sensing what is beginning. And this is the exact moment where many people turn back, because they mistake spiritual transition for personal loss, when in reality what you are experiencing is divine alignment happening step by step behind the scenes in ways you could not control even if you tried. And the truth is, the enemy hoped that the pressure would convince you that nothing was changing when actually everything was changing at once in your favor. And that quiet strength you have been feeling inside you lately is not random confidence but confirmation that heaven has already started moving pieces on your behalf long before you noticed anything shifting around you. Because when God prepares someone for elevation, He does not only change their circumstances, He changes their awareness, He changes their patience, He changes their vision, He changes their expectations so they no longer settle for what once felt acceptable. And that is exactly why some environments suddenly started feeling uncomfortable even though nothing looked different on the outside, because your spirit already recognized that you had outgrown what your mind was still trying to hold on to. And the moment you begin outgrowing something is the moment God begins repositioning something better, even if the transition feels invisible at first. And there is a reason certain doors closed without explanation, and certain conversations ended without closure, and certain connections faded without warning, because not everything that leaves your life needs permission to leave when God is making space for what is meant to arrive next. And sometimes the silence you are experiencing right now is not abandonment but protection, because there are blessings being arranged for you that could not enter your life, while old distractions still had access to your attention. And what makes this season powerful is that even though you may not see the full picture yet, your spirit keeps moving forward anyway, and that is evidence that you are being guided even when the path feels unfamiliar. Because faith is not the absence of uncertainty but the decision to keep walking while uncertainty is still present. And the reason you did not quit during the hardest moments recently is because something inside you already knew that stopping would mean missing what God was preparing just ahead of you. And there are people who underestimated your endurance, and people who misread your silence as weakness, and people who assumed your patience meant you would never change direction, but what they did not understand is that your silence was not surrender, it was strategy, and your waiting was not delay, it was development, and your persistence was not stubbornness, it was obedience to something deeper than fear. And right now, even though the outside world may still look the same, the inside of you is no longer the same person who started this journey, because God has already strengthened parts of your heart that used to break easily, and He has already restored parts of your confidence that used to disappear quickly, and He has already awakened parts of your purpose that used to stay hidden quietly in the background. And what is about to happen next will begin revealing why certain prayers felt unanswered earlier, because they were never ignored, they were being redirected towards something greater than what you originally asked for. And this is the season where you start noticing small confirmations appearing in unexpected ways, like conversations that suddenly make sense, like opportunities that arrive without struggle, like clarity that replaces confusion overnight, and like peace that shows up even before the situation changes. And those are not coincidences, they are signals that your alignment is already underway and your breakthrough is already closer than it feels right now. And what makes this moment so important is that you are being asked to trust what you cannot fully see yet, because trust is the bridge between where you are standing and where your promise is waiting. And the same strength that carried you through the last difficult chapter is the strength that will carry you into the next open door, even if that door appears suddenly without warning. Because sometimes the biggest blessings do not announce themselves early, they arrive quietly after the longest seasons of waiting. Just when people least expect your story to change, And this is why your perseverance matters more than you realize, because every step you refuse to stop taking, even when nothing made sense, has already moved you closer to a moment that will make this entire season understandable in ways you cannot imagine yet. And when that moment arrives, you will recognize that what looked like endings were actually transitions, what looked like losses were actually repositioning, and what looked like delays were actually divine timing working perfectly behind the scenes for you the entire time. And what you must understand right now is that there is a very specific reason you were able to make it through everything that should have broken your confidence long ago, because the strength that carried you through those silent battles was never coming only from your own ability, but from a divine covering that has been surrounding your life even in the moments when you felt the most alone and the most uncertain about what direction things were moving toward next. And the reason this matters more than ever at this stage of your journey is because you are standing closer to a shift than you realize, and the enemy knows that once this next door opens for you, it will change not only what you experience, but how people respond to you, how opportunities recognize you, and how your future begins unfolding in ways that were previously hidden from view. And this is why the pressure tried to become heavier just before this season, because resistance always increases right before revelation becomes visible, and confusion always tries to grow louder right before clarity finally arrives. And if you look back honestly at the last few months, you will begin to notice something very important, that even during the hardest moments, when motivation felt weak and answers felt distant, there was still something inside you that refused to completely give up and refused to completely walk away from hope. And that quiet determination inside you was not accidental, it was evidence that something greater was already guiding your steps forward, even when you could not explain what you were feeling to anyone else around you. And what makes this moment so powerful is that the same God who protected you when people misunderstood you, who strengthened you when plans changed unexpectedly, and who carried you when you did not have the energy to carry yourself, is still actively working behind the scenes right now, arranging circumstances that will soon begin aligning in ways that confirm everything you have been sensing deep inside your spirit for a long time. Because there are seasons where preparation happens quietly, and there are seasons where manifestation begins suddenly and without warning, and you are stepping into the exact point where preparation starts turning into visible movement, even if the first signs appear small at the beginning. And sometimes people expect transformation to arrive loudly and dramatically, but often the most life-changing breakthroughs begin with subtle confirmations, like unexpected peace returning to your thoughts, like the right opportunity appearing at the right time without struggle, like a conversation opening a door you were not even planning to walk through yet, and like a strong feeling inside you that something better is finally closer than it has ever been before. And the reason your spirit has been sensing this shift is because alignment always starts internally before it becomes visible externally, and once that internal shift begins, nothing can permanently stop what has already been set in motion for your life. And there are individuals who assumed your story had already reached its highest point, and people who quietly believed your best moments were behind you, but what they could not see was that your silence was not the end of your progress, it was the beginning of your preparation for something larger than anything you had experienced before. And what is happening now is that the same patience you were forced to develop during seasons of waiting is about to become the foundation that supports your confidence during seasons of opportunity, because God never wastes the time you spend growing, even when growth feels invisible at the moment it is happening. And there is also something important you need to recognize about the doors that closed earlier in your journey, because those doors were not closed to punish you or limit you but to protect you from stepping into environments that could not support the level of purpose that is now beginning to rise inside you. And sometimes protection feels like rejection until the moment you finally see what you were being protected from, and when that realization comes, it changes the way you understand every delay, every redirection, and every unexpected ending that once felt confusing. And right now, even though everything may not look completely different on the outside, there are decisions being arranged, and opportunities being positioned, and connections being prepared that are going to intersect with your life sooner than you expect, and when they do, you will recognize why this season required so much endurance from you, because the blessing that is approaching your life is not small enough to arrive casually. It required timing, it required alignment, and it required your strength to grow strong enough to carry what is about to be placed in your hands. And this is also the moment where your faith becomes more important than your fear, because fear always tries to speak the loudest right before something meaningful begins changing, and faith always grows strongest right before something long awaited finally becomes visible. And what you are stepping into next will begin proving that the waiting was never wasted, and the silence was never empty, and the struggle was never meaningless, because every step you continued taking, even when the path looked unclear, was moving you toward a moment that is going to confirm that everything you endured was part of a process that was always leading you towards something better than what you left behind, and something greater than what you once thought was possible for your life.